Hello, everyone. We are talking to Dr. Sharon Parker about her experiences in training to become a scientist. Hello there, Dr. Parker. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful, Shanta. I hope you're doing well.
I was really excited that you agreed to do this interview because I think you have a very special story that people would be inspired to hear. So let me start with my first question. I would like you to tell me about yourself.
Hey, Shanta. I actually grew up in a small city in Virginia called Roanoke, Virginia. Upon completion of my high school education, I attended Greensboro College in Greensboro, North Carolina, where I pursued a dual Bachelors of Science degree. I have a BS in Business Administration and Economics, and I have a second BS in Sociology. After completing my undergraduate degrees, I went on to pursue graduate degrees. So I actually have a master's degree in adult education from North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University. After completing my degree from that particular institution in adult education, I went on to pursue a master's degree in social work where I attended the University of Pittsburgh.
So you have two master's degrees.
I have two master's degrees, yes.
Wow.
So after I completed my master's in social work from the University of Pittsburgh, I chose to pursue a doctorate degree. And I pursued a doctorate degree in social work from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill.
Now, why did you decide to get a doctorate in that area?
Shanta, I actually worked a while too while I was in school. And one of the positions that I had, I was working as a juvenile probation officer.
Oh,
And I noticed that there were a lot of changes that were being made in order to try to improve the system. But however, it was like the changes were being made from the top down,
okay.
and people weren't asking the people on the front lines what's the best way to implement these particular changes. I felt like if I were going to dedicate my life to working in human services, that someone needed to be at the table that understands how things operate from the ground up.
That makes sense.
One of the reasons why I chose to go back to pursue my doctorate degree.
What lessons did you learn as you were in school for that full length of time?
Wow. So I was, I'm a first generation college student. And I would like to say one of the things that prepared me for what I was experienced as a college student was I participated in a program called Upward Bound.
Oh, okay.
And it was a college prep program that was offered to high school students where we received information and education about classes, but we also visited different colleges and universities in the area. And then my parents really instilled in us the need and purpose and value of an education.
Why
So
is it important for African Americans to have an education?
why is it important for African Americans to have an education?
Absolutely.
Well, I feel for me, an education has afforded me opportunities and open doors that I probably would not have had access to in terms of my career, in terms of networking, in terms of my financial earnings. And then my education has also grounded me as a person
Oh,
and also helped me to grow, to be wise, not to be judgmental of other people because of their situation and circumstances. And it could be because I'm a social behavior scientist.
that makes sense.
And I focus a lot on behaviors and what are some of the underlying issues
Hmm.
that occur when a particular behavior is taking place.
Now, say that again?
I'm interested in what contributes to different types of behaviors.
Yes. Now, that education is really expensive and it's getting more and more expensive, it seems like every year. How did you deal with needing to be in school for so long and needing to pay for that education?
I would probably say that a lot of my education is paid for through student loans.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so that's not something that I would highly recommend.
Okay, so tell
For
us about the
student
student loan
individuals.
option.
Excuse me?
I said, tell me about the student loan option. You said you would not recommend it, but tell me the reason why you would not recommend that avenue.
Um, just because of the fact of the interest
Yes.
involved in student loans, payment over time. I did have I did have a pre-doctoral fellowship that assisted me in a part of my education when I received my doctorate degree. I did receive some fellowships and different stipends, but a part of my education took place out of state. So I was considered an out-of-state student, so the tuition was high.
Right, right. So if a student chose not to get loans, what are some of the other options that you would recommend for them to pursue instead of loans?
I would encourage students to try to make the best grades that they can.
Okay.
I would encourage them to look for scholarships, fellowships early on. One of the things that I was not aware of until I had actually started my doctorate program is that the federal government also has pre-doctoral or
Doctorate.
pre-doctorate programs that students may be able to apply for.
So if a high school student wanted to look for scholarships and things like that, do you know who the best person would be to find scholarships and that type of information?
I would suggest that they talk with their guidance counselors at school. I would actually try to connect with someone in the admissions office at their local community college or local college or university in the area that may be able to give them some information. And then they also have access to the internet. And
I
so it's been a while, Shanta, since I've actually looked at financial aid options for
Mhm.
undergraduates. So I would definitely encourage them to probably talk to um, students who are already on the undergraduate degree.
Okay. I
Okay.
also know if they go to their local public library, there's often in the reference section of that library books
Mhm.
on how to find scholarships. And if you ask the person at the reference desk, they can help you find that book. And but that takes a lot of time. They have to fill out the application, they have to submit it, but the outcome, the benefit is great. Wouldn't you agree?
I definitely agree, but I also think that those of us who have gone beyond should give back and help individuals with that process. Help individuals in terms of applying for schools, financial aid, being able to choose the best school that's for them. Some students may do well in a small um, classroom setting. So, for instance, my undergrad, Greensboro College, average class size was anywhere between 10 to 20 students.
Wow.
Many of my colleagues who attended many of the universities, they may have had a class and it may have been 150, 200 students in the class.
Absolutely.
So I think it's really important to be able to identify which environment may be best for that particular individual. And actually, Shanta, I started off at community college. Well, I started off at community college because of um, finance. I
Okay.
couldn't afford to go to a 4-year institution or university. So I took some classes at the community college, but I made sure that I took classes at the community college that would transfer
Okay.
to a 4-year institution or university.
And what are some of the benefits other than finances for starting out at a community college?
Well, the benefits for me was I appreciated the smaller class set. Okay. And students are definitely, they have different needs. Some students are going to excel um, in different types of settings. But for me, at that time in my life, I needed to be closer to home.
Mm-hmm.
So I met out of my personal needs that I had at that time, as well as my educational needs.
I think that makes sense because if you're starting out and let's say maybe you're a little bit uncertain about your major, because it seems that you chose your major because you were also working. And through working, you noticed certain things that needed to be done, certain things that you cared about, and that helped to guide you in a specific direction. But maybe not everyone has that experience, right?
Well, actually, Shanta, when I first went to undergrad, I wasn't for sure what I wanted to do. So
Ah,
one of the things about going to a 4-year college, you don't have as many majors to choose from as someone at a university. So as an undergrad, I chose business and sociology to major in those two areas. Um, when I completed my undergrad degree, I worked in the areas of adolescent mental health and juvenile corrections. I believe that my life, I have purpose in my life, and my life is guided by a higher power. For me, that's God. And that was the path that I believe that I was set on. Um, and I actually started off, ironically, when I was an undergrad, needing money to
yes.
complete school, I actually did some networking. And I ended up working at an adolescent runaway shelter. And Shanta, the funniest thing is, I picked up the telephone book, and at that time, you could go to the white section, the white pages,
Mm-hmm.
and listed the community-based resources.
Okay.
I was like, oh, here's a place. Let me call and see if they're hiring. And that's where it all began.
So you found a job by going through the white pages of a phone book?
I sure did.
Wow, that should be a new strategy to help other people get a job. Go through the white pages of a phone book. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So you did start your undergraduate education not being quite sure, but you started a path in business and you ended up in a different area. How did that happen?
Wow. Well, I grew up in a small town, and I didn't have as much access to people with degrees in higher education. So where I grew up, people were nurses, teachers, or they went into business and things of that nature. So I just chose business. And then I was minoring in sociology. And I was like, well, why minor when I could major? So I did a double major. As I stated earlier, I think that was the beginning of defining myself as a behavior social scientist. So really looking at groups of people and how people interact. How do we resolve some of our big social issues and problems here in the United States?
That's true. How many applications did you put out and how much money did that cost to go from junior college to the larger institution? What was that process for you emotionally, financially?
So let me speak to this in terms of emotionally. And I just want to be real honest. Financially, I probably can't speak to that
Okay.
because it was by the time the cost of tuition has skyrocketed
Mm-hmm.
since the time I went from undergrad from a community college to an undergrad.
But what
Okay.
about the applications? Like when you were applying to from community college to your larger college, did you have to pay a certain amount of money for the applications just to be considered a student there?
Yeah, so the undergraduate institution that I went to, there was definitely an application fee. And at that time, application fees were running about $35
That's right.
per
They can
application.
start at 35 and go all the way up to about 60, 75. It can get expensive.
Right. Um, and so we're talking about from a community college, you may be paying at that time maybe $2,000 or $3,000 for semester.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas by the time I graduated from Greensboro College, tuition was like $10,000 a year.
Wow.
And that was a long time ago.
Yeah, that was a long time ago because it's a lot more than $10,000 a year
Yeah,
now.
definitely a lot more. I don't know what it is now there, but
Right. You know, Dr. Parker, I also got loans to get through college as well. And for me, I realized it was a lot of money to borrow. I had to borrow it to pay for my student housing, to have extra money for food. And so for me, I realized that at the end of it all, the amount of money that I owe the government is going to be in the six figures. But and although that number is really scary for me, I look at it from the standpoint that I can pay it off over the course of my career. And also, if I hadn't taken out those loans, I would not have the opportunity that I have now to try to do the type of work that I want to do in my life.
yeah, and also, Shanta, many people who pursue doctorate degrees or MDs will have student loans definitely in the six figures.
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But then, people can choose other routes. They can stop at a master's degree, perhaps, and they may not even inquire or accumulate the six figures.
That's true. The longer you're in school that and you take a loan during that process, the more money you will owe.
But Shanta, the one thing that I wish that I would have had when I was going through was more information on financial management.
Oh,
Okay, in terms of having the student loans, being able to work, and just trying to anticipate things that may come up.
okay.
Because sometimes people may take their student loans and, of course, use it for housing, to buy books, but someone's car may break down, and
This is
their
true.
car may be their only transportation to and from the university or college.
This is true.
So there's a lot to kind of think about in planning and budgeting the use of
Hmm.
that money.
Do you have any sort of advice or recommendations to help balance using that money for just educational purposes as well as using that money to survive?
Well, there have been times when I received student loans, and students will typically get a check back. So you receive your student loans, they pay for your tuition and student fees, and there's X amount of money left over. And then it's determining whether or not do you actually need X amount of money. Do you need this much money? Can you return some of the money?
Okay. Also, I think because emergencies happen, from the example that you gave, like a car breaking down, and that's your only form of transportation to get to school, even if you can't return that money, if you put that money in the bank so that that money is there when you need it, that might be a good option as well.
In the bank instead of going to a party or the movies, right?
Yeah, well, occasionally you may have to go to that movie, occasionally you may have to go to that party because you do have to, release stress because, school is really stressful.
Yeah, but Shanta, a lot of people, when they have that extra money, they don't realize that they need to budget it out for certain things.
That's
It's
true.
just like, wow, I have an extra $3,000. So let me go out here and do this. Let me go out there and do that. But you still have to get through the semester. You still have to get through the quarter or
That's true.
term. Um, and how do you man? And then if you still have money left over, you may not need as much money for the next semester, things of that nature.
This is true. I wanted to go back to a question about what is the process to get from being a high school graduate to get into college?
Well, Shanta, I believe the process is definitely more competitive today than it has been in the past. And I would encourage students to really start focusing on their grades, a college track, starting at least in the ninth grade. Because
Wow.
when you apply to a particular institution, you have to send a transcript. It'll be your high school transcript.
So what
And
is a
your
transcript?
grades. So your transcript has all of your grades and attendance from that particular school that you're from the high school or high schools. So when you apply, you have to turn in the application. You have to have letters of recommendations. You have to have writing samples. And you also have to turn in your high school transcripts. Okay.
Also, isn't there a SAT or ACT
I think
exams as
depending
well?
on school, yes, a SAT or the ACT.
Do you know the purpose of those exams? Why they make every college student take those exams?
So
Hmm.
the package will include the things that we just named in terms of your transcripts, extracurricular activities.
Very
If
important.
you're working while you're in school, high school, that can be favorable as well. Um, so in terms of the test, they use that as a means to try to measure how successful one may be at a particular institution. There's a lot of biases
That's
that can
right.
go into those particular tests. Um, I would actually recommend that individuals start studying for that test early. There are probably websites that individuals can go to in order to study for that particular ACT or SAT test. Books that individuals can buy, and I even recommend that people get together for study groups.
That's true.
Now, so like Shanta, as you know, when you're in graduate school, you may have to take. For myself, I had to take the GRE.
That's
Other
the
people may
graduate school
take
entrance exam.
yes. And one of the things that was a challenge for me is, Shanta, there were so many big words
Yes.
on this test I did not know how to pronounce. So I actually use the Merriam um, dictionary online,
Right, right.
and I would type in the word, and then then you can click a button, say that word out loud.
That's a good.
Then that way I was able to hear how the word was pronunciated, and then I could include that word into my vocabulary. And I was more likely to be able to remember the definition of that particular word because I included it in my vocabulary.
Now, the reason why this is important is because on those SATs and ACTs, one of the sections that they ask you about is vocabulary. But I think that also your guidance counselor, high schoolers who are in high school, could go to their guidance counselors and ask for some ACT or SAT books that they may be able to check out, borrow.
Also, Shanta, I recall when I took the GRE, you actually go to the website and download some practice tests.
Oh, that's good.
So individuals may be able to download some practice tests and things of that nature.
Now the GREs comes after they finish college.
Correct.
So they get to high school, they graduate high school, then they go to 4 years or 5 years and sometimes 6 years of undergraduate. Then
Hmm.
they'll take the GREs, the graduate school entrance exams, to get into a graduate program to get like a master's degree or a PhD, right?
Right, and that would depend on the discipline that they choose to get the graduate degree in. So different disciplines may require different tests,
Right.
different exams.
Now all of these tests though, they're pretty expensive too, aren't they?
They pretty are pretty expensive, yes.
So, how would you recommend someone prepare for that financially?
I would actually talk with a guidance counselor. I have spoken with some students who indicated that they were able to get involved in some programs. There are high schools, and those programs help them to fill out an application and complete the whole process for applying to colleges. And they also paid for some of their application fees and also helped to pay for the exams, entrance exams that they needed to take.
Oh, that's an excellent program.
Yeah.
Now, once you got to college, though, did you live on campus or did you live off of campus? What was that college life experience for you?
Well, Shanta, I actually lived on campus all 4 years of my undergrad degree. The first year I was on campus, I had a roommate. The second year, I applied for a position called a resident assistant. And a resident assistant is someone who is helps to manage dorm life. And I was in charge of a particular wing of the dorm. And being a research assistant at my particular institution, you got a certain amount of money off of your tuition, and you didn't have to pay for the room and board.
Oh,
And
that's
I didn't
good.
have to have a roommate. So there were some perks to being a RA. That's what they called it, RA.
Now, you also mentioned that you were a research assistant. So you're in college at this point and you're a research assistant. What is a research assistant?
So a research assistant is someone who assists a particular professor with different types of research. A research assistant can be someone who works in the lab. A research assistant can be someone who works out in the field, or they can be in the office, such as helping to execute research in whatever means the principal investigator needs them to do.
So, what did you do as a research assistant? What sort of tasks did you take on?
Okay, so I started being a research assistant when I was working on my master's degree. So at that time, I was working on a study that looked at opiate use and methadone use with men and women at a particular substance abuse agency. So I actually went in and interviewed substance abusers using a computer questionnaire.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's great. So, at this point, you're in college still. You don't have a roommate anymore because you're a resident assistant. After you finished college, let's say you're at that final year, you're graduating college. What was the process for you to go from being a college graduate now to wanting to go to graduate school? Because that's a whole nother step.
Well, I think people choose that path through different ways. For myself, when I came out of undergraduate, I went straight into the workforce. And I worked a number of years before I decided to go back and receive my master's degree.
Was that helpful for you to make your decision? What value did that add?
Well, with the particular population that I work with, in terms of when I came out, I worked with adolescents, as I mentioned, who had issues with mental health or who were involved in the criminal justice system. And it actually gave me some good work experience, some understanding of what are some of the problems that children and families face who find themselves in these situations. And it just increased my awareness. And I also was able to develop some skills in terms of working with that particular population.
So would you say that by when you graduated from college and you decided to work in the field, do you think that helped you get into graduate school?
Yes, I think those looked as a positive for myself, but I think each person's story is different.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I know individuals who went straight from high school to undergrad to a master's program to a PhD program and never really worked a day in their life.
Okay.
Okay, um, I think it's favorable when you're able to bring some experience to the table, and I think that helps to enhance the learning process.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I'm seeing more and more people go from completing an undergrad straight into a master's program.
Probably because the economy is also challenging. It's harder to get jobs, and so it
Mhm.
might be a better path for people to just to continue their education.
Right.
And what were all the different sort of pieces of that application you had to submit to get accepted into graduate school?
You know, it was quite similar to applying to undergrad.
Okay.
So you had to have a personal essay, writing sample, letters of recommendation. You had to complete the application, take the exam, the GRE, or a exam that's equivalent or whatever acceptable by the department in which you're applying to.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a process.
Now I know the GRE is pretty expensive as well. So,
Yes.
do you think that people should start planning for saving money for that, and also to apply for graduate school? There's an application fee.
One of the things that I would suggest that people do is actually, if you're looking at going to graduate school, there's a website called gradschools with the S on the end.com, gradschools.com. And that lists most of the master's and PhD and MD programs and other programs in the country.
Great.
Okay. So it's important to kind of begin to explore what it is you want to get your master's in and where you want to attend. So there's a book called the Occupational Outlook Handbook. It can also be Googled online. And you could go to that particular website or look at that book and look at a career that you may be interested in. And then it'll give you an overview of what skills are needed to do the job, type of degrees are needed, what's the average salary for this particular position. So it can kind of help kind of get you started in thinking about what it is that you want to do. And then from there, you can follow up by going to gradschools.com and begin to look at the different institutions. I would encourage individuals who are in undergrad programs, who are interested in going to grad programs, to start thinking about that and looking at that at least by junior year.
After the college student has gotten all of the letters of recommendation together, they have written that personal statement about who they are as a person and why they should be in this program, and they've submitted the applications, paid all those application fees, and sent that information off to graduate school. What's the next step? Do they have to go for an interview to get into graduate school, or or are those decisions made just by looking at paper? What's that process?
So I think that process is going to be determined by the program in which they apply to. Some programs will require students to come in for an interview. Other programs will make a decision without an interview. I would encourage students, if they're able to visit the particular department, to do that. You may also learn about the department or other programs by attending conferences.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be another way to kind of get connected with individuals. And that way people are more familiar with who you are. And you're not just a person on paper, but they're able to put a face to that particular individual. Other things to consider would be reaching out to some of the faculty whose research interests may be similar to that of yours or the career path in which you want to take. And I think it's really important, especially at the graduate level, and you're looking at to see if your master's and your PhD, because that may also help with additional funding sources. So sometimes those professors may have grants that they've been awarded and may need students to work on their grants.
And those are usually for research purposes, right? Those are research grants.
The typical research grants, yes.
What is graduate school like, or what was it like for you?
Wow. So you're in graduate school and you're taking 3 classes. You're no longer taking 5 to 7 classes. And you're like, wow, this is great. It's 3 classes. Graduate school for me required a lot of reading, a lot of writing of papers, a lot of group work. And in that, recognizing there's some people that work well in groups, and then there are other people who don't work well in groups. Not at all. And there's challenges in trying to get some of the group assignments together. when all the group members may not be contributing equally.
This is true. But that's also true of life, right?
It sure is. In the workplace as well.
So, at the graduate school level, what makes it different from being an undergrad?
The level of expectation is different. You have gained this knowledge as an undergraduate student, and now you're taking it to the next level. So, depending on your program, you may not have as many tests. You may have more papers to write, or it could be vice versa.
Hmm.
It really depends on the program and how it's structured. So I would encourage individuals to look into the programs and how it's structured. For instance, some programs may require before you graduate from that particular program that you have to pass a big exam. Other programs may require that you have to write this big paper.
That's right.
So you
Called a
really,
dissertation sometimes. If it's for a PhD, it's a dissertation, or for a master's, it's a thesis.
yes, yes, I'm thinking definitely. I chose to do a thesis for my master's degree. So I think that people should really do their homework about the programs or on the programs before they apply and really understand what the expectations are. I would also encourage them to talk with the university about being connected to students that are currently in the program and talk to students currently in the program and to get information and points of views from those individuals.
When you went to graduate school, did you find there were a lot of minorities in your graduate program, or were you one of maybe few ethnic minorities in your graduate program?
Wow. So for me, in my program, my first master's degree was at a historically black college and university. Okay. So there were a lot of minorities there. My second degree, master's degree in social work, was at the University of Pittsburgh, but you talk about an urban setting. So there were a number of African Americans in the class. When I say a number, there may have been 4 or 5 of us in the class. Um, when I went to receive my PhD, there were 2 African Americans admitted into the cohort.
So,
So
so the higher you go up that educational ladder, the fewer and fewer ethnic minorities you see sitting next to you in the classroom.
definitely.
How does that feel sometimes?
So I think that depends on how that individual has been brought up. So individuals who've been brought up in environments where they're practically the only minority, this may not be anything that's different. Okay. For excuse me, individuals like myself who were brought up in the majority schools that were majority African American or Latino, it's different. I think it's good to try to be grounded in your friends and your family and try to reach out to other individuals who may understand your plight, who may understand where you are. But you can't take for granted because this other individual is a minority or this other individual is the same gender as you that they would understand what you're going through. I think people just have different paths. But there are organizations typically on school in many colleges and universities that individuals can join to be around people who have similar backgrounds, cultures, and experiences.
For example, in my graduate program, I actually joined the International Students Club,
Hmm.
and I had a great time because then I met people from literally all over the world. Were there
So
some groups that you reached out to that were really helpful to you as you were going through graduate school?
When I was at the University of Pittsburgh, there was an organization that was geared toward uniting and supporting African American students.
Oh.
So I became a member of that particular organization. And by the time I graduated, I actually held an office where I was vice president.
Wow, taking leadership.
Definitely taking leadership. And it was a great opportunity to connect with other individuals across the campus from different disciplines and different countries. I just learned a lot from other people and developed some good friendships and relationships that are maintained to this day.
What actually happens after graduate school? After that PhD is done, what happens to your life at that point?
Well, my PhD is in social work. And many individuals in my particular genre, when they complete their PhD, they may accept a faculty position at an institution. Some of them may do a postdoc, and I'll explain what a postdoc is. Others may go into government. Others may go into leadership roles of different organizations. I chose to do a postdoc. So, a postdoc for a PhD in social work means that someone goes into a position after they complete their PhD to receive specific training in a certain area. So I chose not to go into an academic position or to work for an organization or the government, but to work more so on my research skills because I consider myself to be a social behavior scientist who conducts research. And the area that I conduct research is in the area of HIV, mainly with African Americans, specifically women. My postdoc, my research focuses on looking at HIV.
What made you decide to take that route?
Well, Shanta, when I was in my PhD program, I did a lot of research in the area of HIV with African Americans. And I have chosen to be a behavior social scientist who conducts HIV research, particularly with African Americans living in the southern region of the United States, where the rates of HIV are the highest than any other region in the country. So I chose to do this postdoc in order to build on my research skills so that I can become what we call an independent researcher, where I would go out and acquire federal funding and grant funding to conduct research in an effort to reduce the spread of HIV and AIDS among African Americans.
When you finish with your program, what is your next step?
So my next step would be to become a tenured faculty member at a research run institution, continuing to do my HIV research domestically, but I would also like to expand my research internationally and began to look at HIV in other countries. Most of my work has been with women, and women across the world are at great risk for contracting HIV. A lot of it has to do with gender roles in society, culture, religion, um, economic status, education, lack of education. So there are a lot of different social, structural, and behavior factors that's driving HIV epidemic, not only in the United States but globally. Well, yes, Shanta, there is. One of the things that I think is so important and that has contributed to my success is that of mentors, individuals who have invested their time, their knowledge, and their energy in me to allow me to get to the position where I am. And I think it's important that individuals have mentors throughout their life.
Mm.
Sometimes we think of mentors being for just in young kids, people who are in high school or junior high school. But when individuals start their career and throughout the duration of their career, mentors are very important, very important. And I believe that individuals need to have more than one mentor because one person may not be able to provide mentee with everything that he or she needs. I think it's also important as we move forth in our careers, not only to have a mentor, but to have an advocate.
Oh,
They're not necessarily the same thing, and it's not always the same person. So the advocate is the person that's behind the door, rooting behind the closed door. If I knew then that it was going to require me to read hundreds of pages a night for graduate school, write these different papers, I would have managed my time a little bit better early on.
right.
Until after I got into the program and began to feel overwhelmed by the amount of work and the amount of time that I actually had to do the work. But if I had a mentor earlier on, a mentor would have said to me, Sharon, you're going into this master's program. It's different from an undergrad program. It's going to require you to do a lot of reading. You're going to have to do a lot of critical thinking. You're going to have to do a lot of writing, and you're going to have to do a lot of research for yourself. Individuals are not going to be putting everything up on PowerPoint. Yeah. You may have to go out and seek an additional resource to better help you to understand a particular topic.
That's a really important point because in graduate school, a lot of times you are teaching yourself.
Yes, independent learning a lot.
Absolutely.
But those are the type of things that a mentor can share with a mentee.
I also know that you were an instructor during your graduate school. Can
Yeah.
you tell us what are some of the expectations that a faculty member or an instructor has for their students?
Well, one of the expectations is a difference between being in high school and moving on to college and to graduate school is that individuals become more of an independent learner. And individuals will be expected to prepare for class, prepare by doing the readings, doing the assignments, turning the assignments in on time, being fully present in class. Being fully present in class doesn't mean that you're texting your friend, let them know what time you get out of class or what time you can meet up later on. Um, my position as a professor is that I am here to work with you to help you to increase your knowledge. I'm a partner at the table, and I'm going to do my part. But if you don't do your part, then that's going to hinder your educational progress and success. So I expect my students to do the reading before class. When you do the reading before class, we can utilize the time in class much better to answer some of the questions that you may have, because you may understand a particular point.
Hmm.
But if you do reading 3 nights for the test, you're not going to have that opportunity to ask those questions. And I understand that life takes place and getting all this done sometimes is difficult, but it is the individual's responsibility to set boundaries
Hmm.
so that they can accomplish the things that they need to accomplish regarding their educational pursuits. And Shanta, I think it's so important to utilize some of the basic tools, such as a calendar, whether you have a handwritten calendar or you have it on a smartphone, where you go through and you map out or plot when your assignments are due, when your tests are due, with applications such as Google Calendar. You can ask yourself prompts as to when you need to start on a particular project. There are so many different applications out there that individuals can use to help organize themselves to get these different tasks done.
This is true. Now, also, isn't there on most campuses? a group or an organization that provides tutoring and assistance for students who go and ask for it?
Yeah, so many universities and colleges will have um, tutoring services for various different subject areas. They will also have a writing center um, that will help them in writing their papers that they have for different classes.
So there,
Those are really important. I also want to mention, Shanta, it's not uncommon for people to feel very stressed and overwhelmed during this process. Many colleges and universities also have counseling centers
this is
that
a good point.
individuals may be able to go to get different strategies on how to deal with the stress and the anxiety that comes with this particular process. And definitely look at the resources that they have online at your particular institution. So some institutions, when you go to their website and you look at their writing center, they'll have templates on how to develop an argument for a particular paper. Or they'll have a template on how do you write a research paper. So there are a lot of tools and resources that are out there. We just have to be able to take the time to access them.
Seems like it's important to have a computer when you go away to college.
It's definitely important to have a computer if you're able to afford one, for sure.
This is true. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
I just would like to wish everyone well on their college endeavors and career and just much success. And please reach out to your mentors.
That sounds like a great plan and very good advice. Thank you so much, Dr. Parker.
Bye.
Bye bye.